This is the PTI podcast.
So welcome along to this PTI podcast. We're talking about all things of power and data and digital and delivering future sponsorships, obviously set against the backdrop of COVID and the removal to an extent or need to replace venue-led activations and in-game activations with sport currently on pause. And how digital and data are providing part of the role in the fight back against it. Delighted to be joined by Andrew and Dan from Turnstile. Andrew, would you just like to kick off with an introduction to yourself and perhaps to Turnstile itself?
Yeah, sure. So I'm Andrew Hoffman. I lead sponsorship pricing at Turnstile, where I help our clients understand the components of value in their sponsorship deals. Turnstile is a specialist sponsorship organisation that we sort of focus on two key areas around valuing sponsorship and then looking at sort of fan insights and data from our market research to help brands and rights holders sort of understand their target market and the audience of their sponsorship deals.
And Dan from Turnstile, if you could just introduce yourself, please.
Yeah, so my role is head of product at Turnstile, and that really has two key focuses. Firstly, it's looking at our methodologies and consistently refining and evolving those as the industry moves and changes. And secondly, it's the technology component of our offering. So making sure that we've got software in place that can be used by our clients. So after they've been delivered their valuation report, we can get all of their data loaded up into our software, which gives them a kind of hands-free access to all of our data moving forward.
Excellent. And then from PTI, we have Daniel.
Hi, Daniel Brown from PTI. I look after and work with our clients in terms of their data and digital maturity and help set strategies in terms of fan engagement, revenue generation, be that hospitality, be that sponsorship, be that more tickets, etc. And it's great to be on this podcast.
And also from PTI, we have Bella.
Yeah, hi, Isabella Alvarez, Head of Digital Media for PTI, with expertise in advertising and marketing across digital media and events.
And my name is Mike Bundy. I'm the CEO of PTI, where we spend our time focused on activating digital engagement across the sports and entertainment industry. So, kicking this off, obviously the sporting landscape has been rocked by COVID, and one of the most challenging areas really has been sponsorship and what to do with in a time where the content from the on-the-field side has obviously been paused. We're just at the stage now, as we stand in early June, of some content starting to return, but likely to be behind closed doors for a period of time. What have been the core challenges that the panel have seen in this regard?
There's probably, from a Turnstile perspective, there's two key challenges that we're seeing around sponsorship. The first one is uncertainty, which is making it very difficult for rights holders to have a meaningful conversation with their sponsors at the moment. Depending on the rights holder, there's still uncertainty around how many games we play, when crowds will return, what TV audiences will be like, which are some of the key things that impact sponsorship value. The second is a lack of understanding of the value of different rights within a sponsorship contract. At a time like this, it's important to understand what rights can and can't be delivered for a sponsor and the value of each of those different rights. So we think that it's especially important for rights holders at the moment to understand the value of their intellectual property, as this is something that hasn't been lost and the sponsors are still able to leverage during a time when matches aren't being played.
I think that's a really good point. I think that sponsors and partners are actually looking to understand how they can actually get their return on investment and get the exposure which they are used to, with the usual rights around the stadium, the shirt sponsorships, etc. But I think that with the kind of understanding and valuing the digital assets, they are able to get those eyeballs and potentially even more eyeballs than they have previously got. So it's about educating with the sponsors and the actually clubs itself to say, right, let's value this, let's put it out there. You are still able to get your return on investment with your investment in us as a club.
Yeah, and I think kind of the challenge for clubs themselves is to update their somewhat antiquated approach in the way that they structure their sponsorship deals, so that in this modern and a new world that we're experiencing, they're more comfortable and able to commercialise it, which I guess is really where Turnstile come in so nicely, because it's a very data-driven approach that they have, and that is what people and sponsors want now. They need to see that value.
Yeah, as we've just touched on there, with stadium revenues turned off, clubs and venues are having to turn to their digital assets and to create displacement value, be it video content from the vault or social or their OTT platforms or promotions in mobile apps. So what examples have we seen of this to date?
From my point of view, I think there's two clubs at polar opposites, which I think are doing quite well. At the top end, you've got Manchester United with a rather large commercial department, but being a fan, following and using their app, I'm seeing more commercialisation of the live streaming, partners being more involved, and this has happened over the past 2-3 months. On the opposite end of club size, you've got a fantastic club in terms of Leyton Orient with their Quarantine Cup, which got into the news, got all over the place, got the eyeballs. And then on top of that, what they've done with Harry Kane and the sponsorship with them and the charities that he supports, which they have leveraged across all social media platforms, and which went across the UK and Europe in terms of the story itself. So for me, that shows that it doesn't matter what size of club you are, that there is potential if you get this right, and good thinking that you are able to monetize and bring in revenues accordingly, no matter the size of the club.
Yeah, I think there are some really good examples. And I mean, personally, as a Palace fan, I've downloaded their app just to stay up to date on recent developments. And it's absolutely incredible how much content they're pushing out. I probably receive around 3 to 5 push notifications a day. And obviously, being a fan, I'm interested in most of them. And I just think there's a real opportunity there for clubs to use those news blasts in a commercial way. And I guess what we're doing with Rover is we're running campaigns instead of ads. So that is a way in which you can take an approach to commercialize those assets, rather than using it as another platform to just chuck ads at people. So I think those two examples that you spoke about were really spot on, Dan.
Yeah, we've seen some really innovative and interesting examples, obviously here in the UK, but globally as well. I think one that particularly comes to mind for me is the NFL draft. So, the NFL, notoriously stringent in the way that they manage their live content rights with the teams. But with the absence of live draft parties, they're actually letting the teams do a lot more live streaming on their own during the national broadcast than they ordinarily would. So usually they're concerned about taking the eyeballs away from the main TV show. And I think they only allow about 15 minutes or so of live streaming each day. But they've increased that fourfold up to 60 minutes for each of the clubs. So, this is one of the most powerful rights holders in the world that's really kind of, I guess, assessing the restrictions that they put on their clubs and what they typically allow them to do on digital in response to COVID. Obviously, as PTI mentioned, lots of great examples closer to home in the UK with players carrying out all sorts of charitable acts to support fans and broadcasting that across various digital channels. And one that we were really interested to see play out over the weekend was not in the sports industry but in the music industry, and the degree of brand integration in the Take That Meerkat music concert, which was streamed on YouTube over the weekend. I'm not sure if anyone tuned into that, but I was really quite amazed by the degree of integration between a huge music property and Take That and CompareTheMarket.com. So pretty fascinating stuff, really.
I think that's a really good point with Take That and the Meerkat. I think that was very powerful and will be probably followed by many, not just music rights holders, but clubs and venues as well. I think that's a really good point.
And we've seen that move to digital start to happen. There's been that natural acceleration, but of course it's not without its challenges. There's been an element of friction, I guess, between how the clubs and the rights holders value the digital inventory, with the clubs keen to retain full value for the sponsorship that they have, and the sponsor perhaps looking to reduce the bill, being that this is against a global financial challenge, and it's not just impacting sports, but obviously across a huge variety of industries. To the guys at Turnstile, how have you guys been sort of helping the market understand, for example, how many mobile app campaigns might equate to the loss of a premium lounge or a physical venue activation that the sponsor may have paid for?
Yeah, sure. So I guess before we delve into the detail on that, what's probably interesting to point out is we've seen a variety of different approaches and strategies which are being played out across the industry in response to COVID-19. Different rights holders and brands just, I guess, approaching it in different ways. So firstly, we see some proactive revaluations of sponsorships being initiated. So those are kind of discussions between brands and rights holders to actually make sure they've got a baseline for future discussions. I think they've probably realised that there's a little bit of a lack of detail under the surface on some of their contracts and need to move pretty quick to get that in place. Secondly, and I guess as we spoke to just now, innovation. So we're seeing a lot of development of new rights coming to market, inventory types, which have been put in place specifically to offset the inability to deliver the existing contractual elements. We're seeing a lot of deferral, so what we kind of refer to as warehousing of rights to allow sponsors future access within either this period or the next when sport returns to normal. So essentially just drawing down on the same rights but at a later point in time. Extension, which is a really interesting one. We've seen certain brands actually really step up. I guess they acknowledge that the importance that those rights holders represent and play for them. So they've actually, I guess, put their money where their mouth is and renewed for future contract terms in order to give those rights holders a bit of surety around their future. And then compensation, and I guess this is the area where we're particularly well placed to support brands and rights holders, and that's the calculation of lost value to determine what future payments or refund payments should take place. And that's, Andrea, that's probably an area that you're better placed to talk to in detail than myself.
Yeah, so in terms of the compensation, the way that Turnstile is helping is our methodology is built up on three components of sponsorship value: so benefits, exposure, and intellectual property, which when you combine those three components, it provides a holistic view of the total sponsorship value. And all values that we share with clients are based on actual market rates that are being paid for those different rights. So whether that be corporate hospitality or a corporate lounge, a premium lounge, as you mentioned, or LED signage, or a social media post or a campaign, each of those sort of values that we share is based on actual market rate. So as a result of us placing a value on each individual right, it enables our clients to have a much more data-driven conversation about compensation, rather than trying to determine a fair value based on a media valuation that's not at all linked to actual sponsorship contract price. So I guess our aim is to put that information in our clients' hands, whether that be the brand or the rights holder, to enable them to have a conversation that is driven based on real market data, and helps sort of make that an easier process for both the rights holder and the brand.
And it's widely acknowledged that full venue reopenings are likely to be a 2021 activity unless a vaccine is found, which is obviously placing more importance on that digital piece to help with some of these rights. COVID's obviously therefore been an accelerator, but actually the world was already heading that way.
Yeah, so obviously it's not a new thing for people to be adapting to living in a digital way, but the level in which they've had to adapt has certainly increased. So in my experience, consumers themselves have far greater expectations of technology than what is currently possible already. And that means that instead of struggling to adapt through the digital experiences and feeling overwhelmed by them, they're actually struggling to understand why those experiences aren't more sophisticated. So I guess it's something that we at PTI are really trying to meet those challenges in implementing digital strategies that meet, if not exceed, customer and consumer expectations.
Yeah, so definitely seeing digital become a much bigger focus for our clients well before COVID, and no longer just a throwaway line that's included in a sponsorship contract. From a rights holder perspective, we've had clients who wanted to better understand the value of different types of digital imagery, sort of based on our market benchmarks for different assets, and in a hope that they could better and properly commercialise this in contracts going forward. And interestingly, from a brand's perspective, we've also had them placing a greater focus on this and wanting us to help them quantify and also reallocate the rights that are included in their sponsorship deals. So to have less of a focus on things like player appearances, which can be quite difficult for a brand to use as there's so many restrictions around when and how they're able to use those sorts of things, and wanting to sort of reallocate those rights to things like digital inventory that they know are becoming more valuable and perhaps easier for them to utilise.
So with this being the case, and sort of the targeted sponsorship approach starting to be on the horizon and brought into near vision, how can the market adapt and get ahead of that curve?
From my point of view, it's about really understanding the value of your rights, which is what we're working with Turnstile to actually understand, to really kind of get that out there, get that understanding. And then on top of that, and I'll go into that in a bit more detail, to understand who the audience is, to go to the partners and the sponsors to understand the eyeballs that are available during this period.
Yeah, I guess from a Turnstile perspective, firstly, we frequently see digital rights being thrown into deals at heavily discounted or reduced rates. I guess because there's often a low cost of delivery, and those rights are often used to help get deals over the line. We've been, I guess, beating this drum for some time now, saying that it's really important that rights holders take stock, make sure they understand the value of the digital advertising, so that they can ensure that value is recognised and reported on. And I think there's an onus on everyone in this industry to do that, so that we can change the behaviour, change mindsets. Secondly, I think if brands and rights holders don't feel they have a firm handle on their digital or data strategy and capability, then we really feel that now is the time to knuckle down and invest, if the resources are there, in people and technology, because the rewards will be there to be had. But building this capability doesn't happen overnight, as I think you guys will be more than familiar with.
Yeah, I think it's really important that rights holders really acknowledge how consumers interact with digital platforms. I think it's something that's kind of, with regards to sponsorship, they've just kind of thought of the ideal scenario as to how people are actually interacting with sponsorship. And I think it's important to drill down on the actual use case, not the ideal use case, so that they can put a true value on their sponsorship. And I guess data-led targeted sponsorship is the way in which you do that. And I guess just doing that alone gets you ahead of the curve, as opposed to being on a curve that is completely non-relatable to the real user experience.
The data becoming a key trend of that. Daniel, from a PTI perspective, how are you seeing the importance of data rise in clubs and as a result of that?
Over the past 3 to 4 months, it has become forefront of mind for many of the clients and many other clubs that we've spoken to out there. There's two sides from my point of view in terms of what data is. You have data which was previously commonly known as how big is your database, so you can value that. Well, it's not. It's about who is your fan base, how many eyeballs are you getting across all your assets, what do they look like, what do they like, to really understand who that fan is, to actually then go to your partners and sponsors to say that this is who we've got, and to understand it's not just about those who are coming to the ground, it's about who are visiting and what do they look like on the digital assets. And then you've got the flip side in terms of the insight. How is this performing? The return on, so you can show the return on investment to your partners or to the sponsors or potential sponsors. This is effectively doing this. This mobile app, for example, is getting this amount of eyeballs, which is more than you'd ever get during a game. And even more probably during live streaming on BT Sport or Sky. So you got the two elements in terms of trying to attract in terms of who you're reaching and the potential ROI, and then actually the performance and actually understanding that. So these are the discussions which we've been having over the past 3-4 months, how to escalate that and bring that more to the fore.
And Andrew and Dan, from a turnstile perspective, how is data that you have, or the data that you have already on sponsorship valuations and the wider market, being leveraged by your customers right now?
So, as I mentioned previously, all of Turnstile's valuations are based on sport and entertainment industry benchmarks and built on real market rates being paid for different types of inventory. So, our clients are using the valuations that we provide for a range of different purposes. A few of the most common ways that we support clients are providing an independent view on the value of rights that were delivered to either that might be to assist rights holders with renewal conversations, post-event or season reporting to sponsors, or even sort of forecasting values for future events. From a brand perspective, we assist brands with determining a fair price to pay for a sponsorship and advise on what others are paying for similar deals in the market. And also help rights holders understand the composition of their sponsorship deals. So to make sure that they aren't over-delivering on things like benefits and exposure and not realising any of the intellectual property in their sponsorship deals.
Yeah, I guess as well, to build on that, what we're trying to think about is not just what is the data that we're giving them, but how are we serving them with that data. We're determined to make sure we provide it to them in as user-friendly way as possible. So after we've produced reports for clients, as mentioned earlier, we're loading it all up into our Dealmaker software, and that gives them all of those data points to leverage it at any point in time. And what we're seeing is that the clients are actually using these exports directly out of the Dealmaker software to take hand in hand into these discussions with partners. And I think, as Andrew mentioned earlier, what that's enabling them to focus the conversation on the 10% of the discussion which really needs to take place and rule out the 90% of the discussion that doesn't. So it's really helping them get focused on the crux of the issue, I guess.
And looking slightly further ahead, what trends do we see coming sort of in the immediate and then across the next 12 months? Certainly, there's been a lot of talk about disaggregating sponsorship and shorter term deals to get through the immediate challenge that we've seen so far.
Yeah, I think it really comes down to sponsors wanting flexibility and freedom to adapt their approach. Obviously, they run their campaigns and they choose sponsorship based on their company goals. But I think COVID especially has shown that there is a need to adapt and to adapt quickly. And I think that means that, like you said, the shorter term deals are really key in having that flexibility. But there is a way in which clubs and rights holders in general can give that flexibility to sponsors, to stop them feeling that fear of having to commit without knowledge of getting the return that they need. So I think it's just really down to rights holders to be flexible in their agreement, and it goes back to getting rid of that antiquated approach, giving the sponsor space to adapt year on year and making it dependent on what their company goals are.
I think that's a really good point in terms of that disaggregation. But in my mind, probably over 2 to 3 years, as things hopefully come back to a bit of normality, that will be fully known. And you could probably start in 3, 4, 5 years to see those bigger deals coming back and taking absolute exclusivity on certain aspects on the digital side. But in the short term, there is that need for that flexibility and that need for the disaggregated deals as the industry catches up and understanding the value of digital assets and the sponsorship of them.
Yeah, a trend that we expect to see sort of in the short term is a much bigger emphasis being placed on data and insights in sport and entertainment than ever before. Particularly in the short term, we're going to see brand marketing budgets significantly decreased and the need to internally justify any expenditure on sponsorship. So as a result, this should lead to brands placing greater focus on not only paying the right price for a sponsorship, but ensuring that the composition of rights included in the deal are well aligned with their marketing objectives. So, whether that be a greater focus on exposure for an up-and-coming brand, or whether it will be trying to engage a different audience through digital channels need to ensure that that composition of rights is well aligned with their objectives.
So just wrapping up then, from each of your guys' perspective, what's the one top tip you would give to clubs and venues on the overall sponsorship front? Let's start off with Andrew at Turnstile.
I think it's really important that rights holders both understand and realise the value of their intellectual property in sponsorship deals. Without harping on about it, it's something that at a time when it's difficult to deliver standard benefits and exposure right for sponsors, rights holder intellectual property is something that still can be utilised by brands, and this shouldn't be forgotten if you have to enter into a conversation about compensation or what rights have been delivered throughout the season. So that's one thing that isn't necessarily a great cost to deliver or any cost to deliver for a rights holder, but a value that is being delivered for a brand.
Dan Gaunt, your top tip?
Yeah, I think now is the perfect time to be brave and embrace innovation. COVID-19 has thrown so much up in the air for discussion. And I think brands, rights holders need to take this opportunity to try new things that may not have previously gained traction or, buy-in or approval. All of a sudden, they're back on the table and people are willing to engage in conversation. So, everyone's been forced to take a step back and think in a more open-minded way. And I think, I really encourage everybody to embrace that and be brave.
Bella, what would your top tip be?
I think kind of echoing what I've been saying is just to really listen to sponsors and advertisers and partners. What are their needs and requirements? Put them first and do the research, find out true use cases, find out the true value and data behind sponsorship value, and put a science forward in order to make sure that you're delivering that value properly and up to standard.
Last but by no means least, Daniel, your top tip?
Number one, to echo all the comments previously just made just now. But from my point of view, it's to really start to understand who your fan is and their behaviour, because that helps the sponsors understand how they can be reached. Have a look and go back to what we're saying in terms of looking innovatively. What is your digital landscape? What do you have? What is working? What is not? What are you assessing in terms of its performance? It's kind of starting, taking that step back, as previously mentioned. Really have a look at that and then take that potentially what feels like a leap of faith. But it's, as we are seeing over the past 3 to 4 months, you do this right, you're starting to actually gain traction. And it goes back to the fact that, and this is no disrespect to Leyton Orient, but they are a smaller club, but they have taken an innovative approach, which, I think many Premiership clubs would be quite jealous of, because they stepped back, looked at what was going on and took this approach. And I kind of applaud what they've done with their activations.
Well, great. That's all we've got time for today. My thanks to the panel, Andrew and Dan from Turnstile and Bella and Daniel from PTI. Thanks to you all for joining today. And if you would like to hear anything more from PTI or from Turnstile, or understand a little bit more about the offerings of both, then head to ptidigitalgroup.com. Thanks for listening.